Ben's new tram system has made the city one of the most desirable places to live in the Midwest. People everywhere are talking about how great it is. It's got modern transit, tons of jobs, and bluntly, it's just a cool place to live. Since the tram was built, coffee shops, bars, and restaurants have popped up all along the route. That kind of vibrance attracts people, but for many, the rent is just too damn high. But where there's demand for housing, you better believe developers are lining up to meet it. And of course, one of those developers is James Jones. Since splitting with Jamila, he's been lost, and for good reason. He's lost his house, he has to buy Jamila out of the business, but more importantly, he's lost her. At first, he just mopes around his apartment in the Jamila Jones building, a name that now feels more like a curse than anything else. But soon he begins to hear that Jamila is thriving. Under her leadership, rail capacity has been maxed out at the Clearwater Southern Rail Yard, and now she's leading the charge to increase capacity. Again. Hearing this, James realizes he needs to do something, anything to keep busy. So he tries to buy some of the newly cleared land to build a few houses, but he finds out that he's too late. Russ Kowalski bought all of it. All of it. But he didn't just buy the cleared land, he also bought Nick King's farm. What's more, he's already working with a planning consultant to lay out a neighborhood and has secured commitments from the state for an interchange that would serve the neighborhood. James is crushed. He locks himself in his apartment for days, until he gets a call. Morrissey's Groceries needs a developer to handle the entire development process, from site selection to land purchase to gaining entitlements and construction. It's a different kind of project than he's used to, but it's enough to pull him out of his funk. A silver lining of the deal is that he won't have to put up his own cash, something he doesn't have much of right now considering he has to buy Jamila out of their business. The only catch is that he'll have to work with Russ. Now at first, this is awkward, but as they work together, James realizes Russ isn't who he expected. He's sharp, hardworking, even a good guy. Somewhere along the way, maybe over talks about the bandits, they even become friends. But that's a story for another day, because today we've got work to do. We'll begin by laying out Russ's neighborhood from scratch, using real-world planning principles. Then, we'll build a major interchange to serve the development, and even convert the University Avenue intersection into a full interchange. Then, we'll build a pedestrian bridge across the river to make up for the pedestrian access that we're going to take when we build our interchange. Then, we'll add land uses to our entire development, including Morrissey's Groceries. And finally, we'll expand transit to connect this new neighborhood to the transit center in the Stadium District. And be sure to stick around till the end where I show you a few adjustments that we made on stream a couple weeks back. And if you're excited to be back in Bend, hit the like button. Or if you're ready to check back in on Paradise Bay, hit the like button for that too, and let me know how you're feeling in the comments below. Or just leave an emoji representing the city that you'd like to visit for the sake of engagement. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Hello, welcome back to Magnolia County. We're going to kick things off today by laying out our new neighborhood in its entirety. But before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about why neighborhoods are laid out the way that they are. But generally, when you're platting out a neighborhood or laying out a neighborhood, the very first thing that you would take a look at would be the soil conditions and wetlands. For instance, the reason why Manhattan exists where it does, or why it's able to, is the soil underneath Manhattan is very, very rocky. That rocky soil can support very tall structures, very heavy structures. The other consideration is the presence of wetlands. Taking a look at this, you can see that there are tons of farm fields right here, some of which have dark areas. Those dark areas are wetlands. And if you were to develop a neighborhood right here, you wouldn't want to build a home in that location. The basements would flood, and there would be all sorts of issues generally in the neighborhood with flooding if you didn't account for those wetlands. Now, if you wanted to build in those areas, you'd have to make sure that you're building in some sort of water storage. Now, obviously, in city skylines, neither of those are considerations, but we can kind of fudge it, and that's what I want to attempt to do. But the first thing that we have to do is move Nick King's farm, because I want to begin the neighborhood right here. This is where we are going to be pretending that there's a bit of a wetland. Now we have this building right here, the dairy house, which is providing us some global benefits. So I don't want to eliminate this. So we are going to temporarily relocate this. Now, if I forget to move this, I want you guys to call me out on it. It's not going to happen today, but in the next episode or two. And for now, we'll just leave this right here. We'll still get the benefits, and it doesn't look terrible there. We might actually leave it there and just build around it. Now, for the rest of the farm, we're just going to eliminate 100% of everything here. Now that we have a mostly clean slate, we are going to upgrade the roads flanking this little part of the neighborhood. You might have noticed I'm moving this road towards this neighborhood. We are not at all going to encroach upon this property, at least not as a part of the local road build. Now we're going to build out the roads in this area. What I want to imagine is that we're filling in the wetlands and trying to completely control things by building a dry pond. So to that end, we're going to build that right in the center and basically wrap roads all the way around it. So I'm going to send out our first road right here. And now I'm going to use the continuous tool because I want to create a half circle. And I was initially thinking that we're going to place this right here, but I want to see where the center of this will be because we are going to be creating a bit of a stream to head this way. And I think I may actually extend this out just a little ways. Now I'm going to be a little bit tricky. I want to find the middle of this circle, which is right here. And I want to parallel this on either side. We're going to come back to this in just a moment, but I want to lay out the rest of this area. And one thing that I want to consider here is the tree line and the elevation lines. We're going to basically just try to conform to this. Now, in my planning career, one of the things that I've done is actually work to preserve trees. And one way that I was able to do that is actually during the planning process saying, you can't chop down the trees. We've got to preserve some of that green space. So that's what we're going to do here. And we'll butt the road right up to this. Now this whole area is going to be our dry pond and a parks complex. And these other areas, we're going to want to make sure that we are able to develop as much as we can. That's why we have this road right here. This road will give us the maximum developable space in each of these areas. Though right here, you can see that there are some areas that's inaccessible. So to access that, there's really two ways that we can handle that. Number one, we could add a full road all the way through here, or we could have a cul-de-sac. Now, in general, I think that the developer would probably not want to do anything more than a cul-de-sac. We're not going to let them get away with that. So I'm going to throw in an eyebrow here. Now, before we create our dry pond, I need to upgrade a couple more roads in this area. In particular, we need to take this highway and turn it into a local road. And I think I'm going to change things up right here. It gets really narrow and comes to a point over here, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense for a new neighborhood. So we will sever the highway and then straighten things out. So we're vacating right away right here. Now, the whole thought process here is that we now have nice and easy to develop lots that are very predictable. The land was very flat here, and it would make sense to try to control this as much as possible. Now, where we got over here, I tried to make sure that we were conforming to the terrain, maximizing the number of lots that we could build. That brings us over to Mulberry Dale. And this is an area that's already developed. And one of the challenges that we're going to have here is that the homes are right butt up against this road right here. So that means that we can't just upgrade this without using eminent domain. So just reasonably, we're not going to. So if you've ever seen a neighborhood like this in your community where it seems like it has really narrow roads or no sidewalks, in some cases, this is the reason why. Now, I am going to change one thing right here. This is clearly an old version of the game that was used to create this. It's actually one of the first neighborhoods in the city. So I'm going to remove this. We're going to add one of our new cul-de-sacs. And ultimately, this accomplishes the exact same thing and looks a ton better in my opinion. So wherever we have these, I'm probably just going to replace them just like this. And now to create our dry pond, I want to make sure that we are a few meters below the road level so that we can channelize that water. We're going to cut through this area right here and in between these homes and dump right into this reservoir. And now we need to create a number of bridge sections. Now, in the real world, these would likely be box culverts, but we can't create those in-game. So I'm just going to use Anarchy to upgrade these little segments right here to be bridges. And now I just want to calm down the edges through here. You can see that some of these are fairly steep. And just reasonably, this is a dry pond, so it's not something that we really need to worry about. Now, I want the ground to physically look different in this area. We're going to use Sully's thick riverbed, which I think is going to be perfect in this area. Now, one of the unfortunate things is that I can't see the contour lines, so I'm really going to need to guess and check and then maybe even modify the area that we just created to this riverbed texture down the line. And I think to give this another layer of depth, I'm going to go with the riverbed thin all the way around this. To really make this look great, we're going to add a bunch of landscaping through here, but I don't want to add anything thick through the center of this, so we'll likely just have scrub bushes, and on the outside we'll plant a ton of trees. Now, eventually this is going to become a parks complex, and I want to make sure that we're thinking about pedestrian connectivity right off the bat because of that. So what I'm going to do is have a pedestrian path that links all the way through here. And then we're going to have another path that goes all the way through the park area. And we could modify this down the line as we actually add amenities to the park. But I want to switch gears and build out the rest of this area. And what I'm thinking is we're going to try to preserve all of the homes through here, which is going to be kind of a trick. But to that end, we'll just upgrade this road. We're going to be changing this considerably, but we're going to leave a little stub of this road in here. Now I'm going to do something a little bit strange right here, and I want to basically level this out and create a bunch of buildable lots. So to this end, I'm going to grab this height right here. We're going to imagine that we're taking the top of the hill and pushing it out. And then down here, we'll create more lots by getting the street level and pushing it back. And honestly, I just really love this roadway layout. It tells the history of the place. There's a rationale for why some things like this were not upgraded. This was a rural road that doesn't have enough right-of-way to add sidewalks. So as a result, we added this little trail back here to make up for that. So all of this has a reason for existing the way that it does, and that just makes it feel very organic to me. So with our neighborhood layout complete, let's move on to building our interchange. This project is going to be absolutely massive, and that's because it's really 3 projects that have been smashed together. This often happens with highway projects. Maybe you have complex interchanges that are connected, or one project impacting another, or it's just easier to mobilize all at once. In this case, we're going to say that all 3 of those scenarios are happening simultaneously. The main project is going to be an interchange here at Riverbend Boulevard. We want to create a full interchange that could serve both the Orchard Grove Stadium District and the new neighborhood. Now, this interchange will encroach a little bit upon this intersection right here. And as a result, we're going to need to redo this and turn this into a full interchange. When we do that, we'll sever pedestrian connectivity in between Orchard Grove and these neighborhoods over here. So as a result, we'll build a pedestrian bridge across the river. This is going to require additional space, and though I think that to create the interchange, we'd love to encroach upon the Williams properties, they are going to be reluctant to help us, and as a result, we'll take as little as we can. We're going to begin by eliminating a whole bunch of the highway, basically starting back here and heading all the way over here. This will be the area that we're redoing. And I'll begin with this interchange right here, and I want to begin this interchange by cleaning up our nodes and then doing a bit of site preparation over here. I just want to make sure that we have enough space to place this interchange. We're going to have ramps going in between Linden Street and the highway, so we have to have space for that. Now I'm going to use the parallel mode for this. We'll go down to a half unit of separation in between these. And then from here, I'm going to use the 1-lane highway ramp We're going to send this to the ground. We'll redo the sides of this once the interchange is done. And I want this to be nice and straight. So I'm going to connect right here in the highway. And then I extended this up to 152 meters so that the ramps were the exact same length. That's probably as much symmetry as we can have here. Now, with that in mind, now I need to send these two to connect. And I'll use the complex curve tool for this. Next, I want to join up right here. And I'm just going to add an extra lane right here and try to send it straight in. Now, we need to find another way to access this. And though I'd love to have ramps that go on both sides, we'd acquire too much of their property. So what I'm going to do instead is use the continuous tool and a 2-lane highway, and we'll create an interchange right here. I'm going to have this set to ground level and constant slope, which should make this look really nice. For the next part, we've got to really be careful though. So if we look at our terrain here, we can see that this is going straight up, and I actually don't want that to happen. What I think we're going to do instead is keep this leveled for a little while so we don't have to raise up a bunch of ramps over the top of the highway. So to that end, I'm going to flatten this right here. And then right here, we're going to start to boost things up. Let me clean up those nodes first. And I'll just use the continuous tool to kind of work my way through this area in a very natural way with gentle curves. Next, I want to create this ramp connection, and that's looking pretty bad right now, but it's going to look really good in a second. Next, we'll work on the University Avenue interchange. Now for this one, we're likely going to need to extend the 3 lanes all the way down here because we're going to use them as part of this interchange. And now I'm going to disable anarchy because I want to try to cross the highway without it on. Now to that end, I'm going to begin by creating a parallel road coming off University. This will be a 2-lane highway, and the separation here will be 1/4 of a unit. Now I'll begin with a continuous curve all the way across here. And that's basically perfect. I couldn't make that any lower. Now, one thing I was a little bit concerned about that is clearly coming to pass is that we're going to encroach upon this road. Honestly, that's not a huge concern to me. I think that for a highway project like this, you could see this road shifting over as a part of the project. And with that, we have one movement down. The next one is going to be a movement basically coming from this road onto the highway. Now, this is going to be an ugly movement, and we might need to actually modify this ramp a little bit. The reason it's going to be ugly is we're going to be sharing a lane for just a moment. In fact, I'm probably going to take it back to here. And now we have to do a little bit of grading, otherwise this will get really ugly. So I'm going to slope down to this area. That weaving movement is going to be very difficult in rush hour. I'm wondering if I can make it a little bit better and move this back just a little bit. And I would say that that is marginally better. We'll have to do a little bit of work to clean this up, but I think it's doable. Next, we have to go up and over the top of this ramp right here to make our connection in from this highway. Now for that, I'm going to do some pretty significant work right here. I'm going to add a node here, and then we'll back this up. And if I can do earthwork to get up here, I'm going to do it. So that's exactly what we're going to try to do. That right there is a little under 7%, which isn't ideal, but it could be a lot worse. Now I'm going to reverse this, get it in the right direction, and we'll try to go right up and over the top. I'm going to try not to use anarchy for this so that I know that the connection actually works. And now, reasonably, we've got to decommission even more of this road. And we're going to be basically right over here when we start to jump up to this ramp. Now for this bit, I decided to turn anarchy on, and you can see why it's not always great to do that. But I should be able to add a node right here, or maybe a little ways back. And that should do the trick. It's not ideal, but it should do the trick. Now we've got one more movement to create through here, and that's basically from this highway up to University Avenue. And for this one, we're gonna have to do a lot of grading. And that's all our movements right there. All we have to do is link this up to the bridge and we're good to go. And in my opinion, that's looking really, really, really good. Now, there's a couple of spots where I think a little bit of manual finessing with Move It can improve things. But honestly, if you've set things up appropriately up front, it just ends up looking really, really good. Now, there's a spot right here where I'm not sure exactly what happened, and one right here as well, where I think just a little bit of tweaking will definitely make this look finished. And then honestly, some of it is just getting the lane math right, and boy, oh boy, it's looking really, really, really good. And before we move on from the interchange, let's get this linked back up so everyone here has the internet. Now I want to clean everything up, so that's really focusing on the details through here. Things like having a retaining wall right here. The final component of this project is going to be a pedestrian bridge across the river. Now, this is going to be a deceptively challenging project because of the way that pedestrian facilities interact with themselves and with how they interact with pedestrian roads. Now, I'm going to make this even more challenging by challenging myself to copy the architecture of the University Avenue Bridge. So we're going to be using one of the cable-stayed bridges, and I think I'm going to start with that. We're going to try to place this appropriately. And generally, what I want to do is sneak this in between two homes and then come and meet right in the center right here. So to that end, I'm going to link up just like this with the center of this roundabout. That might seem strange to you, but this is actually an easy way to make this stay flat. If you don't do this, it'll jump up a whole bunch. So now I'll just add a node here, delete this segment, and then delete that, and now it's perfectly level. And then after that, I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this side, but I kind of want to eyeball where this is gonna come in. And I think this is more or less where I want it to come. It's not gonna be perfectly straight, so we're gonna need to use some sort of a curve right here. So to get the first part right, I'm just gonna place this right in the center of these lots. Now this would be very controversial, very difficult to do after the fact, but we're gonna take some liberties. And now I'm gonna place the cable-stayed pedestrian bridge. And the part that's going to be so challenging here is I want to make sure that this is perfectly level, or not perfectly level, but I don't want it to have any lumpies and bumpies. And I want to make sure that the center span is centered in between these two areas in the river. So to that end, I will link up with this side and then try to get this as close as I can. And if I just link it up, it's not centered, and that's the challenge. So I need to pull it back to about here and try to make this link up. What I think I'm going to do, I'm thinking on the fly. I'm going to extend this out to right about there. And then I'm going to try my best just to link this section right here to this one. And that's not going to work. You can see that it's actually not going to be straight. So I will bring this over here, line it up with this, and then I want to eyeball this to get this to be the same height. And actually, I don't have to eyeball it. I'll just turn on my snap to guidelines, and now I can get it perfectly straight down here, perfectly straight right here, then bump it up. I just want to look at the bridge real quick to make sure that it looks right. It's not right. It got a little bit too far out there. Attempt 2. And that, I believe, is perfectly centered, or it looks pretty good to me. So now I just need to figure out a way to link these up, and they're more or less the same height. I think I would have liked to be maybe just a little bit further down, but we will live with a bit of imperfection. Now I'm just going to use complex curve to link these together. You know, it's not 100% perfect, but I think with a little bit of nudging, I can make it pretty good. And once I get this to be flat, I think it'll look a lot better. You can even see it kind of clean that little junction right there. And that just looks a lot better. I don't think it's done much damage here, but I can just bump a couple of the center pieces down a bit. And honestly, that is pretty outstanding, very level. I like the jog. It seems more like a feature than a bug. I just need to fix the landing right here. Oh, that's the good stuff right there. But I think that we've got to take this up to the next level. I feel like if we could connect this up with the key wall, it would have even more utility. So you better believe that we're going to do that. And I want to make sure that I have constant slope on for this one. And it might even cut against the contour line. Honestly, that looks pretty darn good. The only improvement I want to make, and I'm probably letting perfect be the enemy of good here, is on this little turn right there, there's nothing that's actually supporting this, and I feel like I've got to change that. So I'm going to add one node right about here, and then I will make this an elevated segment right here. And that to me seems a lot more reasonable. It seems like this could actually exist in the real world now. And with our interchange complete, let's move on to a bit of land use planning. To ensure that this neighborhood is as cohesive as possible, I've decided to put together a land use plan for the entire neighborhood. So there are two goals for this plan. The first goal is to have a transit supportive corridor. So that's going to be a corridor that has enough density and enough origins and destinations to really support having transit running up and down the street. Now in the short term, it'll be buses, but in the future, if we could have enough density to support trams, I think that'd be amazing. The second goal is to not disturb the existing neighborhood. So to that end, I want to make sure that we are transitioning our densities from this low density area to our high density area and not having high density buildings looming over the top of these older neighborhoods. So with all of that in mind, let's go through the land uses. The high density residential land uses are to be focused in these 3 blocks right here. And the idea is that these are the closest blocks to our tram and to everything happening in Bend. As we step back from there, we're gonna have a number of duplexes and a commercial core right here that is really full of neighborhood supporting commercial uses. We'll also have a little bit of low rent housing right here and a gas station. Moving over just a little bit, we're gonna have a little bit of commercial right here, some office just beneath that, and then our grocery store right here. Across our swale, we'll have more commercial and more office. And then as we start to leave the neighborhood, the densities are going to drop off. We'll have duplexes, an elementary school, a bit of commercial, until we reach single-family homes right at the end of the neighborhood. Moving up to the area where Nick King's farm was, we're going to have commercial uses right here. This is going to be a major arterial, Heather Street. We'll have some row homes opposite those commercial uses. We'll have a little bit of single-family flanking this area right here that has the eyebrows. And we're going to have row homes facing Riverbend Boulevard to make sure that we're maximizing our density. We'll have some UK medium density around the park, and then I want French low rent buildings right here and right here to ensure that as many people have access to the park as possible and a variety of income levels are able to access the park as well. And then as we approach our older homes in this area, we have 100% single family uses. So all the way through this area right here, we're looking at a whole bunch of single family homes. And one more nod to the older part of the neighborhood is having a bunch of parks and institutional uses, kind of acting as a buffer in between the new neighborhood and the old. So we'll have one park right here, one park right here, and then an elementary school right about here, which should act as a buffer in between those new uses and the old ones. And then finally, for this entire area, I'm going to do a mixture of zoning and plopping. There are specific areas where I know exactly which asset I want to have, and then other areas where I'm not 100% sure. We're just going to zone things in and experiment a bit. So with our plan in place, let's get building. And we're going to start right here. The goal is going to be to have a gas station right here from the UK pack, and then we'll have some of our Eastern European low rent homes right here. For these next 3 blocks, we're going to have UK high-density residential along Riverbend, and along Pine Street, we'll have some Japanese medium-density residential. And this is significantly more density than I was expecting, so we're going to step this down a little bit, likely going for some UK medium-density zoning. And this is much more in line with the densities I was hoping to see in this area. Looking behind these properties, we're gonna go with some duplexes, basically filling in this entire area with the exception of right here, where we'll have a couple of commercial buildings. Now for these next few blocks, we're gonna have to do a couple of interesting things. First and foremost, I'm gonna start out with the grocery store, and that's because I don't know if we actually have enough space for it. So I know that we have to sever Pine Street right here, and then I'm just gonna plop this thing down. And it looks like I'm about 1 unit shy of having enough space. So what I'm gonna do is just shift over this road. And then I just bumped up one corner back here to be the same height as the building so that things look fairly good in the rear end. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. I can probably fix this entirely though by adding a key wall to this. Or a retaining wall. That seems to do even better. Now across from the grocery store, I've got the perfect asset. It's this Eastern European commercial low level 5 4x3. And to me, this looks incredibly modern. I'm gonna place a couple of these. And I'll show you a way that we can basically get this to conform to any block. But basically that's what we'll do over here. We'll do the exact same thing over here, but I want to have a break in between. And I'm going to use Move It extensively with this and try to make this completely conform to this block. And the nice thing about this asset is the way that it overlaps, you can just kind of pull the assets in and out and make them look completely natural because of the way that they clip into one another. So this, in my opinion, it's one of my favorite commercial assets at this point. I'm gonna do the exact same thing over here. I wanna make the side feel a bit more vibrant, and I have an idea for this. We're gonna basically find one of the Eastern European storefronts. And I'll place that on the other side as well. And then after that, we're gonna place something above this to make it feel like it's a little bit more purposeful. So for this instance, I wanna find the business that's right here, Fatty Bite, and put something above this. I'm gonna do the exact same thing on this side. It's O Furniture over here. And look at that, we got that super cool neon. It looks so good when it's like that, and it completes the side of the building. Now for the rest of this area, we'll have office right here, and then we'll have a strip shopping center back here that's completely dependent on the Morrisseys. Moving across the street, we've got a lot going on here. Starting right here, we're just gonna have some real basic commercial. Opposite of this, we're gonna have some row homes. And one thing you might have noticed is that I don't have the zoning toolkit mod in here. It currently is experiencing some issues. So as a result, I'm gonna be using some of these retaining walls to block the zoning. I'm going to extend the row homes along Riverbend Boulevard, but this time they'll only be 2 units deep. And then through this area, we're going to have single family homes, but I think I want to take these cul-de-sac bulbs and kind of tame them down a little bit. Around Pine Street, we're gonna have some medium density UK residential. Now for these last 2 blocks, I wanna do probably the most extreme thing I'm gonna do in this entire area. I'm gonna steal some buildings from over here and combine them. And then steal some more just to place. Now we have a couple more blocks of duplexes and a space that we're going to reserve for our school. And then here we're going to add a little bit of commercial to serve this neighborhood. And then place our final duplexes. And the very last thing that we're going to do is add in some of our single family homes. So we'll start out with the UK assets and then move into our beach properties assets. And with that, all of our zone buildings are in place. And honestly, I think that this turned out really well. It didn't go 100% to plan, but sometimes you've got to be a little flexible and willing to make a couple of changes on the fly. And I think that all the changes made this a ton better. And with all of our zone buildings in place, let's move on to adding transit and city services. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. This looks pretty bad, but here's the thing. We basically have added no city services to this area. We don't have a district covering this area, and as a result, services aren't assigned to this area. So the first thing we have to do is create a new district for our new neighborhood. And here we have our new neighborhood of Elm Creek. And this neighborhood has nearly 8,300 residents, so it is a very large neighborhood. So to that end, it's going to need a lot of services, and honestly, I think we're going to probably go through the whole spectrum of services and add them to the neighborhood. So we're going to begin with healthcare and death care, and I just want to start adding some of our urban promenades and modern architecture amenities through here. So I think we're going to begin with our clinic right here, this urban medical center. This should fit nicely into one of these office areas. So I'm going to remove the offices that we have here and we'll replace them with an urban medical center. This is an office, so this to me makes a ton of sense. And then right away, I'm going to assign this to operate in this district along with some of the surrounding districts. Next, we'll take a look at death care, and we are going to need a crematorium. Now, this asset is one that I used to love that I no longer do because of how big it is. It just seems out of scale, but the other assets don't necessarily fit the build. So I'm going to sneak this in probably back here, which is just outside of the neighborhood. But to get this in here, I'm going to need to upgrade this road. And right away, I'm going to add a bunch of upgrades here. There's a bunch of hearse icons, and this is what I was afraid of. We've actually got 3 dead bodies here. The dead bodies are making people sick, and those sick people are dying. So we're going to need to work on this quickly. So I'm going to add in the additional incinerator so we get 50 more bodies per month that we can process. And then I'll add another hearse garage with 5 more hearses. And honestly, I'm going to add 2 of those. We're going to need it. And hopefully that cleans things up for us. Next, we have garbage management, and we're handling that globally, so I'm not going to worry about that right now, and we'll skip on to education. Now, education's an interesting one because I was supposed to have 2 locations for elementary schools, one right here and one right here, and you can tell that I've zoned it in. I think we're going to try to take this lemon and turn it into lemonade because I have an idea that I think is going to work out really well. But first, we're just going to add a school right here. And I think we're going to go with our community elementary school. Most of these other options are just too large or the capacity is too small. So I'm going to place this right here. And then one thing you'll notice on this side is that there's a bit of a grade. So I want to add some of the extensions, but I think that they're going to contort if I do. But I've got an idea. I'm just going to place it for now. I'm going to add this extension wing right away as well because this school is already filling up. And then I'm going to add a key wall right to the side here. And you can see how that just improves everything, makes it look really, really nice. That is a good solution for this area. And then we were supposed to have another elementary school right here, but considering we've added these apartments, I think that we'll take this land right here for the elementary school. And honestly, being this close to the pedestrian facility, it makes it a really good location in my opinion. I think we're going to use the exact same community elementary school, and I'm going to position this slightly underneath the bridge. And then I want to add the upgrade right away to see if we can fit it. We indeed can. And then I'm going to add the playground right next to this, and hopefully this doesn't go onto the highway. And it looks like it does. What I'm going to try to do is add a key wall here and see if we can make it look okay at least. And you know, in my mind, this looks pretty good. I think it might have turned out better than it would have if we would have placed it over here because we had just a little bit more space. Now for both of these schools, I'm going to assign them to this district. And it's important to remember that we're a little bit behind on our education because we didn't have these facilities. So I'm not going to overreact and build a whole bunch more. We're going to let things shake out for a little while. In addition to our elementary schools, we're going to need to assign a high school as well. And I want to see if we have any excess capacity right now. And it looks like this high school is almost full, as is this one right here. So what this is telling me is that we are going to need to add a high school in this area as well. And that is something that bluntly I did not plan for. So we're going to need to add something. Now I'm going to see if we can fit this modern high school behind our elementary school over here. It's a little bit too large. So instead, we're going to call a little bit of a mulligan and add that right next to the elementary school. And we'll have this operate in just the exact same districts. But I've also added Orchard Grove and Sunrise Dale as well. Because we're handling college and university education globally, we're going to move on to adding fire protection. And for this, I'm going to again go for some of these smaller modern architecture assets and try to kind of sneak them in where I can. Now to that end, I'm going to take a bit more of this office space and add it right here. And then once again, we'll assign this to operate in those exact same districts. Next up, we have police coverage. And for this one, I'm going to use a bit more eminent domain on something that we just plopped and basically eliminate all the buildings right here. This is going to be for two reasons. Number one, I think police coverage is going to go right here. And then I also think that we should have a post office. And I've added a UK police station and an Eastern European post office. And it's funny, I actually kind of gave this asset a bit of a hard time in my review of it, but it just fits very nicely in terms of the size into this neighborhood. So we're gonna go with it. Now, there's one more communication service that we should check out, and that is our communications coverage. I think it's gonna be pretty good because we have our telecom tower right here, but it's still worth checking in on. And it seems like we're okay, but I'm gonna add this bandwidth increase right here, which will improve coverage for the densest part of the neighborhood. There are two more services we have to be concerned with, transit and parks, and I'm gonna focus on parks first. And I'm gonna begin with this small area right here, where I just wanna find some amenity that fits nicely here. I'm thinking I wanna see if a community pool could fit right here. And that fits perfectly. And bluntly, this is something that would probably be a draw from all around the community. So I added a bit of parking to ensure that people could park here if they had to drive from a distance. The next place we're going to add a park is right here near King Bait and Tackle, because this area right here is supposed to be a park space. Now for this one, I think we just want to have a playground. And I'll grab one of these large playgrounds and we're going to face this towards Pine Street. And I'll remove some of the trees around here. I will be adding more trees around here, but I want it to feel much more manicured and controlled when I do so. And then finally, I want to add a number of parks through here to try to make this feel like a large park complex. I'll begin with a dog park because everyone loves a dog park. Then I'm going to add a couple of basketball courts. Next, I want to add a tennis court. I'm going to see if I can fit that right here. Fits perfectly. And then once again, we'll add a large playground. And along with that, I'm going to add a couple of small playgrounds. And now I want to make some of these assets fit in just a little bit better. So I want to remove things like fencing that I just don't think makes a lot of sense around a playground like this. And then I want to make these a little bit less vibrant using some of Sully's decals. And those are just lovely in my opinion. And then finally, going through this part of the neighborhood, I want to see if I can fit in a couple of small parks over here as well. I was able to fit 3 of them over here. Now, I want to talk a little bit about this whole process and how it would work in the real world. Now, generally, whenever you're thinking about city services and you're planning a new neighborhood, this is something that gets brought up in the very beginning. And one of the planner's responsibilities is to go to each of these agencies. So you go to police, you go to fire, you go to EMS, you go to the parks department, you go to engineering. You want to make sure that there is enough coverage for all of these city services in this brand new neighborhood. And if there's not, you either need to get land for expansion of those services, or the developer needs to foot the bill of expanding the existing buildings, or at least help with it. But it's a game, so we're gonna be a little bit reactionary, and this is what we had to do to make it work. And honestly, I think it's gonna be just fine. What I am gonna do though is let this run for just a couple of minutes to make sure that all of those death care icons go away, because I'm a little bit concerned about it. And after waiting just a few minutes, all of our death care issues are resolved. So that leaves us with one more service to take care of, and that's public transit. And this is gonna be a fairly simple route. We'll start here at the bus station, go up Riverbend Boulevard, and then loop around the dense part of the neighborhood. I could see a second route being formed that kind of goes off down Mulberry here, but that's not going to happen today. That's something that'll happen down the line. So let's begin by adding some bus stop signs, and I'm going to add these every 3 blocks or so. And now that I've added those, I'm going to add bi-directional routes. So this will be 2 separate routes. And I'm going to begin both of them here at our bus station. And now that we've got those drawn in, I just need to label them. We now have the red and the yellow lines. And with that, we've added every single city service to this neighborhood, and I think I'm going to hold off on looking at global numbers until a future episode where we kind of rebalance everything in the community. For now, I think we're going to move on to a little bit of landscaping and detailing. For the landscaping today, I have 3 clear goals. Number 1, I want to make sure that each building feels like it's on a parcel. So I'm going to get rid of all the fences and try to make everything feel like it's an individual lot. Number 2, I want to adjust all the street trees. I often forget to do that, but I'm going to add trees and really pay attention to where we have parking. And then finally, I'm going to adjust parking. So there are a couple locations where I didn't add parking where I think we have to have some, and I'm going to go back and adjust those areas. And with our plan in place, let's get rolling. And I've been landscaping and detailing for an hour and a half, and honestly, I'm really pleased with the way that this has turned out. And with all of that done, there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. And before we wrap things up for the day, I wanted to show you this area because we made some significant changes on stream. In general, I wanted to take the density down now that we have assets that are more appropriate for this area. I never intended to have all these tall towers, and as a result, this is how we've changed the area. The changes that we've made include adding some medium density Japanese housing, as well as some French low rent housing, and a whole bunch of UK attached terraced housing. And in general, I think that this area looks a ton better. It looks urban, but it's not a bunch of towers. This is what it was always supposed to be. And then lastly, I wanted to take a look at transit utilization on both the red and the yellow lines. You can see that these are not heavily utilized just yet. 123 passengers on the red line, 82 on the yellow line. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to take the number of buses way down because we've got way too many on there. I've also taken both lines and made them fare free so it lines up with the rest of our service. And with that, our new neighborhood is complete. Remember, we need a name for this neighborhood, so if you've got one, drop it in the comments below. But with that, I think that we're going to leave it here. I've really enjoyed building this one today, and I really hope that you've enjoyed watching it. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things that you could have been doing. You decided to hang out with me and watch me plant a million trees as I built this neighborhood. And for that, I appreciate you. And I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.